Hi, I'm Bearcroft. Welcome to part 2 of pyrographing a hedgehog on a cheeseboard. As in part 1, what I've done is sketched out a little pattern for the border. This is supposed to represent bramble flowers and seeds, probably early spring, something like that, before the bramble fruit starts emerging. So we've got some leaves, some flowers and little bits to do. As before, I'm starting off on a fairly low setting until we get some marks made on the board. So let's begin with testing it out somewhere here, using the sort of lengthways on our wire to kind of draw a reasonably fine line. And as before, what I'm doing is trying to see how quickly I can move, the pen to get a decent mark. And you usually find the lower the setting, the lower the heat, then the more you have to hold the pen onto the wood to make a mark. So this is going about the right speed for me. I can gently stroke the pen across to make these fine lines. I'll show you the difference if I turn this right down to the lowest setting, which on my pen is 1.4 volts. And if I try to make a mark in the same way, at the same speed, so virtually nothing is happening, just a little bit of shading. And don't forget, of course, you can always test it out on a spare bit of wood I've got here. So if you drag that across there at the lowest setting, very, very faint mark is made. If I turn that up to the highest setting, which is 2.2 volts on mine, and see the difference here. I turned it the wrong way, there we go. So this is the highest setting. And if you linger too much, then you'll create a lot of smoke and a very deep burn. So again, going back to my usual starting point, which is a fairly low setting. Okay, and that's just heating up right now. Just enough to do these reasonably dark outlines. So we'll get the outlines done first, and then we can do some more subtle shading. And of course, what you want to be able to do is to do these sort of fine lines without worrying about overburning. And if you start on a higher setting, a hotter temperature, then that's going to reduce your chances to be able to control the lines as much. And I like to make a nice smooth line like this, not too fast. But if you have it on a higher setting, then you have to do a much faster stroke. You can always go back and redarken some areas that should have been a little bit darker in the first place if you want to, but you can't lighten them up. So once it's overburnt or too darkly burnt, then you can't lighten it. You can obviously darken it. So what I'll do is continue to finish the drawing lines off, and then I can use the putty rubber to erase, get rid of any lines that I don't want. You will, especially if you're using a lot of graphite, you will find you'll get some deposit built up if you're using a wire or a stylus tip, whichever. You may find that you get a little bit of deposit building up on the end of your wire. And if that's the case, you can either A, burn it off on a piece of spare wood, like that, and just burn the deposit off, or wait, switch it off, wait till it's cool, and then get rid of the deposits with a fine bit of sandpaper just to clean it up, and then you're good to go again. This will happen generally if you've got a lot of graphite on there, which I have on this one because I wanted that to be visible in the video. If you've got a lot of graphite on there, which of course the iron, the pen is burning, or if you've got something that has maybe some of the deposit on the surface, maybe varnish or something like that, burning through the varnish, in which case you might be better just to sand it down first before you burn on anything that's varnished. Also because of the fact that creates potentially toxic fumes from burning the varnish. And of course, if you're bothered about any kind of fumes from the burning process, then do have a window open, or you could have a fan somewhere on your table to blow away the smoke. It generally doesn't create that much smoke unless you're on a really high hot setting, in which case you might get quite a lot of smoke. It depends on the wood as well, of course. So now what I'm going to do is just got a piece of putty rubber, kneadable eraser, get rid of all the pencil marks. Now I've got the outlines, and then I'm going to finish this little bit off with some shading. You can use a plastic eraser, any kind of eraser will do. If you've got any kind of grain in the wood, then the putty rubber, if you soften it first with your fingers and mould it, put it on a heat source for a minute or two, then that can go right into the grain of the wood and lift out all of your initial pencil. So well, there's our outline. So now I'm going to go back in and just do a little bit of shading, starting with my usual fairly low setting and just testing on that little bit of wood. So I want to be able to move fairly quickly but get some fine lines. So let's start with some leaves, try and get some fine lines away from the light source, so the shadow side of the leaves if you like. Test it on that, that's fine. So now I can move on the same setting, I can move fairly quickly. And that will just give me a fainter line, subtle shading. So remember, this is the same setting as I used for the outlines, but just working a little bit quicker. Just on these leaves too. And obviously, because you're working quicker, you're moving the pen quicker, it has less time to burn the wood. And of course, if you find that's too faint, you can always slow down your movement. Let the pen linger on the wood a little bit more. Particularly if you want to do some veins in the leaves or something like that, some simple veins. Or if you want to just reinforce some of the missing bits on outlines, just let the pen linger a little bit more, like so. Let's look at the base of some of these bramble flowers. And again, just slowing down the movement of the pen, just let the burn be a little bit darker, and put some subtle shading on this leaf. This is a standard hatch shading, if you like, linear hatch shading. You can do curved hatch shading, cross hatch shading, any kind of shading you can do with a pencil or a pen, you can do with the Pyrography tool. The iron, I call it a pen. You have to remember is that, like a pen, once you've made your mark, there's no going back. So plan it carefully, sketch it out with pencil first if you need to, and before you make a mark at all, just test it on a little bit of scrap wood. Have that by your side just to make sure you've got it on the right setting and you're not going to overburn it. Again, darker areas like that, just let the pen linger. All this is so far been done on just the one setting. You can usually find a setting that works for you. It works for how fast you want to go and how much pressure you want to put on. So you usually find that there is a favourite setting, and this is mine. And as I said on part 1, it also depends on the kind of wood you're using. Different woods have different burning properties. So they are a real pale wood, like a base wood. You can actually use the lowest setting on whatever the tool is you're using, and that will give you a fairly decent mark, something like this. This is not quite as light as basswood in tone, so I probably wouldn't be able to do much with the very lowest setting, but on a really pale bit of wood like basswood, you can start off with the very lowest, hardly any heat at all, and get some nice little shading. Of course, the darker the wood, the less you're going to see from this kind of setting. So you're going to need to turn the heat up a little bit, perhaps on a darker wood. So just make sure you test each time the particular burning properties of the wood you're using. So that's my outline drawing and some shading on the bramble leaves and flowers. So we're going to leave that there, and then on part 3 we're going to have a look at how we can add some colour to that, just to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more colourful if that's what you want. So don't forget, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos like this and other art tutorials. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time.